Welcome to lesson number 4 in the AP English Grammar Unit. Topic of today is parallelism, which is actually also addressed in our course textbook in chapter 6, which I know you guys don't have just yet, but that's why the PowerPoint here says chapter 6. Parallelism has to do with grammar, certainly, because it's a grammatical function, but parallelism becomes more important as an element of rhetoric and of style. And that should become clear as we work through this. This is a very big SAT topic. You will have questions, sentence fixes on the SAT, and you will need to be able to recognize if they are not parallel, because that makes them generally awkward. So I've had students tell me that this is probably one of the more useful of our grammar topics. So we will move right into it. And what parallelism means is that sentences or parts of that sentence within it are parallel. And that is when certain structures that are inside of them take the same form. We'll look at some examples. This can be done on 3 levels. They can be parallel at the word level, at the phrase level, or at the clause level. So words can be parallel to each other, phrases can be parallel to each other, and clauses can be parallel to each other. First of all, at the word level, what you see in the first example is highlighted in the second bullet point. Why should we live with such hurry and waste of life? Hurry and waste are parallel. They're both nouns that are functioning as a compound predicate. Hurry and waste. They're both nouns, they are parallel. In the second example, same thing, but with adjectives. In eternity, there is indeed something true and sublime. Parallel adjectives. At the phrase level, here we have a sentence. Men esteem truth remote, in the outskirts of the system, behind the farthest star, before Adam and after the last man. Here we have parallel phrases. In the outskirts, behind the farthest, before Adam, after the last man. These are prepositional phrases. They're in succession with each other within the same sentence, but they are parallel in format in that they are repeating the grammatical structure that you see. In the outskirts, behind the star, before Adam, after man. Repeating parallel prepositional phrases. Another example. It has truly been said that never in history have so many educated people devoted so much attention to so few children. In this example, so many, so much, so few. It's parallel. The same structure is being repeated. Notice that they're not the same words being repeated. It's the same structure. So many, so much, so few. So this, so that, so this other thing. Here's another one. This is more difficult because there is no zeitgeist to read, no template to follow, no mask to wear. We should clearly see here where the parallelism is. There is no zeitgeist, no template, no mask. Now notice the rest of this is actually also parallel. No zeitgeist to read, no template to follow, no mask to wear. So here we actually have a couple of a more complex parallelism being shown here. I've highlighted the basics. None of this, none of that, none of this other thing. Then we have the clause level. Clauses can be parallel as well. So for example, the title of Henry David Thoreau's Walden, one chunk is entitled Where I Lived and What I Lived For. These are clauses because you've got subjects and verbs, and they are parallel. Where I lived, what I lived. They're similar in grammatical structure. Here's another example. We perceive that only great and worthy things have any permanent and absolute existence, that petty fears and petty pleasures are but the shadow of reality. So here we have 2 parallel clauses. That only great and worthy things have any permanent and absolute existence, that petty fears and petty pleasures are but the shadow of reality. We can see they start the same way, that this. They are parallel. they're not word for word. Not every single word within that is parallel to each other, but that they follow the same grammatical pattern. Here's another clause example for you. If we are really dying, let us hear the rattle in our throats and feel the cold in our extremities. If we are alive, let us go about our business. If we are this, let us do that. If we are instead this, let us do that. These are parallel clauses. Notice that the first one is a lot longer than the second one, and that's okay. What's important is the parallelism between if we are, let us, and if we are, let us. Whoops, that went clicked by accident. These parts are what's making these two clauses parallel to each other. They are repeating a structure. So now, that seems pretty simple. Parallelism becomes even more important when it's not there. It is much easier to spot a lack of parallelism than it is to spot actual parallelism existing. So for example, why should we live with such hurry and to waste life? Now if you compare that with way back here, why should we live with such hurry and waste? This one sounds a lot better than hurry and to waste life. Hurry and to waste is not parallel. I will not go back again. Here's another one. It has been truly said that never in history have a lot of people who are well educated devoted their attention to such a small number of children. That's a lot more cumbersome than so many, so much, so few. The parallelism helps this to become not only clearer, but more concise and more straightforward. As a rhetorical and stylistic strategy, you would use parallelism to emphasize some ideas, maybe to contrast ideas, or to connect ideas. There's a couple of specific types of parallelism. These are all rhetorical devices that you might see show up. Anaphora is the repetition of subsequent phrases or clauses that follow the same parallel structure. Antithesis is when you have opposing ideas that are presented in parallel structure. And those are the two most important that you're going to be dealing with. Those are the two that you should be familiar with. The other two terms, you should know that they're related to parallel structure in case they show up on the AP exam. You can find these definitions in your textbook, but I do not teach excessive terminology, and I would say that these two terms are ones that are a little bit more obscure, that are less important and less necessary that you know everything about them. You can certainly look them up if you are interested, but anaphora and antithesis are the two that you should definitely be familiar with and keep in your toolbox. For our purposes, I am not going to ask you what type of parallelism it is. I'm just concerned that you are recognizing that it's parallel and how to make things parallel if they're not. So we have some practice exercises here available in our textbook. I am not so worried about them. If you want extra practice, you can do that. However, I think a better option for you would be to go to your extra exercises packet. There is something entitled Parallelism Quiz and Parallel Structure Quiz. I don't actually give it as a quiz anymore, but I think it's a multiple choice, and I think it makes it very clear to see a parallel structure next to one that's not. I strongly encourage that you do that quiz, that practice, that multiple choice one, before you try the activities of actually creating your own parallel sentences. That is the end of Lesson 4 on parallelism. We'll be working on those exercises in class.